what I wanted to say was this is my welcoming to Southern Miss, Rodney, and thank you for coming. You're one of my all-time favorites. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you much. So anyhow, in the history of civilization, there's only been 3 waves of transformation. You had tribal humming and gathering, which was millennia. You had the agrarian society, which was 6,300 years. Industrial revolution, was about 200. And we're now in the information or the knowledge age. So if you went to the Big Bang and take a little break line and go to 1750 and then start going a century, and you will have doubled knowledge. And then you're seeing doubling of knowledge every 10 years. And then when you get to 2030, it's estimated that all the knowledge, technical knowledge that is known today will comprise 1% of the knowledge available by the year 2030. So how long do you plan to live? Somebody give me a number. This is assuming that your significant other doesn't find out what you've been up to.
2060.
When?
2060.
2016? You're very good. 60, okay. All right, if in 1947 was the expected lifespan in the U.S., and then 1935 it was 62. Why is that an interesting date? And the combination of 1935 and 62 years old.
Social Security.
Right, Social Security. Congress was looking for a way to get money and extra money, and they figured, okay, we'll set Social Security at 62. They couldn't get it till then, but of course they'll be dead, so we'll have all their money. And then with the agricultural revolution and health, all of a sudden at 2012, 79 years, 2014, actuaries say 86 is pretty good, and then in 2100, you'll be 100 years old. So a child born in a wealthy country today has more than 50% likelihood of reaching 105. If you're over 60 now, you have a good chance of living past 90. If you put aside 11% of your salary when you graduate, you will have to work until you're 85 to have a decent retirement income. Okay, look at it this way. From the time you graduate to 65, you will actually live longer after 65 until you die. So there's no way you're going to retire at 65. So how many jobs will you have? How many businesses will you establish? 12 to 18, because you're going to be able to work till 90. You will be out of necessity a continuous lifetime student. You'll see more new knowledge and inventions created in your lifetime than all the discoveries from the beginning of recorded history to the present. Knowledge will start doubling every 75 days within 5 years. Each of your smartphones is more powerful than the fastest supercomputer in the world of 20 years ago. With information technologies growing at an accelerating pace, the disruptive of the exponential is infiltrating more industries. 65% of children entering grade school this year will end up working in careers that haven't been invented yet. Not only is it difficult to predict what careers will exist in the future, it's equally uncertain which technology-based skills will be viable just 5 or 10 years from now. So in less than 10 years, the majority of graduates won't be working at jobs that will be working at jobs that don't exist today. They say that when you graduate, probably when 10 years from now, you're not going to be working in the field that you got your degree in. The past no longer predicts the future. Business of the future is to produce knowledge, not reproduce knowledge. In the future, everything that can be routinized, codified, and dissected will eventually be done by artificial intelligence and robots. Social and emotional intelligence is what humans are uniquely good at least for the next decade or two. Creativity is the currency of the new millennia. Knowledge creators are the only people whose jobs cannot be outsourced. Oxford researchers say that 45% of America's occupations will be automated in the next 15 years. Vulnerable fields include transportation, logistics, production labor, and administrative support. Jobs and services, sales, and construction may also be lost in this first stage. 2 billion jobs will be lost to robots and AI by 2050. The consulting firm Pricewaterhouse predicted this year 38% of American jobs could be automated by 2030. Financial, insurance, manufacturing, information, and communications, a wide swath of sectors that rely on rigid systems fit that description. The person that cannot understand and accept the possibility that their discipline or domain may come to a sudden end will not fare well this century. Shift happens. Designing the built environment for your new users and clients, robots. Due to the unintended consequences of China's one-child rule, they don't have enough workers to man their factories in 2025. As a result, the CEO of Foxconn is adding 1 million industrial robots to its assembly lines. Amazon bought Kiva System, which uses 100,000 robots to move goods around warehouses, greatly reducing the need for human employees. When it comes to robots and automation, we may be in the elbow of an exponential curve. Sustainable manufacturing will be energy efficient as robots, artificial intelligence, can work 24/7, 365, can work in the dark with little or no conditioned space. Robots can operate with repeatable and increasingly fine precision with no supervision. Costs associated with robots have fallen 50% compared to humans over the last 25 years. New construction robots are learning how to do their jobs by mirroring the movements of humans, copying their motions to dig and stack projects. Its fleet of evacuation and assembly bots could help build settlements on Mars. Ultimately, the team is trying to develop technology that let an operator working on Earth give useful instructions to spacefaring robots. Well, last week NASA announced they had finally made concrete in space at the space station within the Mars atmosphere. So it's coming. With the coming AI robot invasion, highly human skills that machines cannot do are too quirky, intuitive to program or automate. Skills like perceptiveness, awareness, responsibility, and caring will be in demand. Do y'all know about the 2 factories in Arkansas? There's 2 multi-million factories that were built in northern Arkansas a year ago by the Chinese, and it's completely run by robots and artificial intelligence. They don't have to pay tariffs. They're within 3 highways that are international or across the country, and they can be within 1/3 of the American cities in a day. Depending upon the development of good artificial intelligence, the next phase could put jobs in management, science, engineering, and the arts at risk. The only safe area for workers is to acquire creative and social skills. The other way to beat the clock is not to focus on solving problems, but on discovering them. Discovering new problems is something that computers can't really do and are unlikely to be able to do in your lifetime. Discovering new problems is otherwise known as creativity. When you design the built environment for ADA wheelchairs, you design for robots. Universal Design studies the way which buildings and products are constructed for older people or those with disabilities. Robots can't handle the twisting staircase. Put in a ramp. As for that pesky doorknob, make entryways motion activated or use levers. If you want droids at your beck and call, start thinking about robo-fitting your environment. So essentially, if you look at any buildings that are done now, you're going to have a huge job in retrofitting them to serve robots, because more and more robots are coming into the workplace. Any building you design now needs to be for robots, because they're going to come in, or you're going to end up retrofitting, which is going to be a good selling point to your clients. Install flat handles, use push bars, install automatic doors that can be digitally triggered by sensors, and the bot, and equip dressers with anything else that opens. If you have a wheeled robotic butler with arms, you need fewer steps, plus hallways wide enough for U-turns. Hardwood or tile floors are better than thick carpeting that slows a bot's roll. With droids capable of feeding clothes into a folding machine, there's no need to monitor wash cycles anymore. Locate the laundry room near your walk-in closet for maximum efficiency. Okay, robot chefs and servers. So they're becoming ubiquitous. Robots in stores. You have Lowe's, all sorts of stores that are now stocking robots in. You go to ask a question, where can I find this number 2 wrench? And the robot drives you over there. And then, I don't know if there are Kroger's in here, but several grocery stores now have these robots that come up to your door. You just swipe your credit card in and it'll open up and you can pick up your groceries. And Amazon's got a whole series of Prime robots. Just like architects design a nook for the refrigerator or stove, your robot home will need space for power-up stations. Wireless recharging when the robot rolls up to the zone will make it more unobtrusive. A telemedicine robot allows a specialist thousands of miles away to visit the patient's hospital's room via a video screen mounted at its head. When the physician is ready to visit another patient, she taps a new location on a computer map. This is telemedicine. And 2 weeks ago, they had the first heart surgery done by a robot by telemedicine. He was 1,000 miles away and instructing the robot on a very delicate, heart surgery. So that's happening. University of California Hospital, Mission Bay Wing has a fleet of tugs going around the halls. They deliver drugs, clean linens, meals, while carting away medical waste and salt sheets and trash. With 25 robots, it'll be the largest swarm of tug medical automations in the world, each robot traveling an admirable average of 12 miles a day. Hospitals and hotels are having robots deliver items to the guest rooms. Forget your toothbrush, razor, etc. Robot walkers helps patients regain natural gait, increases productivity of physiotherapists. The robot walker is capable of supporting a patient's weight while providing the right amount of force at the pelvis of the patient to help the patient walk with a natural gait. There's roughly going to be 90,000 doctors, nurses, and therapists short in the next 10 years. So they're going to incorporate more and more robots into healthcare. As robots become safer, smarter, and more capable, robotics companies are eyeing elder care as a huge potential market. A rapidly expanding elderly population could also necessitate other new forms of home assistance technology. Earlier this year, a vaguely humanoid robot served juice to a researcher lying on a hospital bed. The robot uploaded its memory of the experience to a system of cloud servers, essentially a shared global brain. This is Stanford now has a global brain for any robot anywhere in the world. When the next juice serving robot came along, it had already downloaded the memory, knew where to find the juice, how to get to the bed. The phenomena of robots teaching one another is known as transfer learning, and it can prove increasingly useful as more people begin to rely on robots for medical care and other services. 1 out of every 3 jobs will be converted to software, robots, and smart machines by 2025. So Roomba bathroom cleaners can't navigate spaces behind toilets or tubs, so you have to learn how to design for robots. It doesn't affect the humans in any way. Solar-powered horticulture bots need plenty of sunlight. They like their plants arranged in raised, easy-to-navigate rows and columns. Japan is opening a hotel which is staffed by 10 people and 10 multilingual robots. Robots will check you in. Another will deal with your luggage. In the tele-ICU section, critical care doctors sit at oversized video monitors that continually collect data on very far-flung ICU patients and can spot signs of imminent trouble. If a patient needs attention, Mercy Virtual Care Center physicians can zoom in via a 2-way camera. close enough to read the tiny print on an IV bag. In the past year, ICUs monitored have seen a 35% decrease in patients' average length of stay and 30% fewer deaths than anticipated. This translates to 1,000 people who were expected to die who got to go home instead. And in rural areas, they have telemedicine now, where if they can't get a doctor, local doctor out there in time, they can go 1,000, 2,000 miles away, and they will advise the nurses and staff on what to do till the local doctor can get there. The doctor stands at a workstation wearing a pair of 3D glasses. 3D image of organ floats in front of you, exact replica of a patient's heart, and essentially it's literally floating what's in the patient. And then they can cut through it and see what's happening before they cut into the patient. Research at Tel Aviv University have successfully printed the world's 3D heart using a patient's own heart cells and biological materials to completely match the immunological, cellular, biochemical, and anatomical properties of the patient. A team of Australian surgeons and researchers have developed a 3D printing pen that allows surgeons to draw and sculpt customized cartilage implants made from actual human stem cells during live surgery. So there's all sorts of things they can 3D print. With tissue engineering, it's possible to produce tailored living human spare parts. If the method can be rolled out on a larger scale, it could be the third alternative form of treatment alongside the traditional form of surgery and pharmacotherapy. So, are you designing hospitals that can accommodate that kind of technology and robots? MIT is modifying cells into primitive digital computers. They want to create cells that will deliver drugs within a person's body. Cells will also be programmed to perform biochemical tasks, such as producing hydrogen. Doctors can now use augmented reality to peek under a patient's skin. A team of researchers at the University of Alberta has created a medical imaging system that projects scans onto a patient's body, adjusting to the underlying anatomy, even if they move around. So a doctor can carry this around. You don't have to sit in front of an X-ray machine. By 2020, the full effects of the genetic revolution will be felt across society. Will hospitals become high-tech computer communication center? Can a conventional present-day hospital be remodeled to accommodate these procedures? To perform the previous features, how will you design or redesign your hospital? Most of your parents are referred to as the last of the Mohicans, the age before the internet and growing up in the development of accelerating change. You're the first generation in the age of everything. Oil demand is predicted to peak as early as 2021, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and some experts may have already peaked. Currently, electric vehicles displace the need for 350,000 barrels of oil each day. And long-term, EVs are projected to disrupt demand of over 58 million barrels of oil per day, a figure steadily on the rise as EV costs plummet. This week, the UK's government set out plans to end the sale of new petrol and diesel cars by 2040. France is banning diesel and petrol cars by 2040. Add Germany, Norway, and the Netherlands. China and India are talks on setting a date. China plans to ban sales of fossil fuels entirely. Jaguar Mercedes-Benz commits to offering electrical and hybrid version of all of its vehicles by 2022. All new cars by Volvo will be electric starting this year. The city of Paris has banned gas combustion engines from Paris for the 2024 Olympic Games. Only electric vehicles and bicycles will be allowed. Colorado's Air Control Commission voted to adopt a zero-emission vehicle program that will increase the ability of electric vehicles in the state, improve air quality, and increase transportation. Colorado joins together with 10 other states that have already adopted programs and follows up its adoption of state clean car requirements and limiting emissions of greenhouse gases and criteria pollutants from all new passenger vehicles. Here's a 26-year-old that's filed for 45 patents, 10 of which have been approved. But the real holy grail is electric vehicles. His goal is to achieve 10-minute charging speed in electric vehicles before the end of 2019, which could retire the internal combustion engine once and for all. By comparison, Tesla's fast change stations take in half an hour to reach 80% capacity. In an era of autonomous cars, there may be no more need for auto insurance. Autonomous cars don't or rarely crash, so why insure? Even worse, for the insurance industry, people will stop buying cars altogether. You won't own a car anymore, but instead you'll have access to a 24/7 autonomous car service. Just like companies today that don't own their servers anymore, instead they use the cloud from Amazon or Google. If you don't own a car, there's nothing to insure. In terms of lifetime vehicle savings, EV drivers are expected to save between $3,200 and $12,000 depending on the vehicle class. Those savings are largely driven by significant reductions in fuel and maintenance costs. Autonomous cars don't drive drunk, don't text, and don't fall asleep at the wheel. Okay, they just started their first self-driving shuttle service in New York this year. Self-driving trucks are ready to do business in Texas. There'll be a safety driver at the wheel to monitor the 18-wheeler, make sure it doesn't do anything wonky. Daimler Trucks announced the introduction of electric self-driving trucks in California. The U.S. has a shortage of 60,000 truck drivers. A Tesla electrical self-driving truck went coast to coast last month. They're predicting between 2025 and 2030, all 18-wheeler cross-country will be autonomous vehicles. And that'll put about 2 million truck drivers out of jobs. There are close to 1 billion parking places in the United States and only 253 million passenger cars and light trucks. The average automobile spends 95% of its time sitting in place. A self-driving car could replace up to 12 regular vehicles, and parking lots could be turned into parks for urban farms. London right now is converting its unused underground spaces into urban farms, with the lights, and several warehouses around in the north have been converted into urban farms. So what happens to all the car dealerships and the acreage they occupy? So you're going to start seeing those disappear. So they can be turned into urban farms. 43 million Americans are now older than 65, and the 10,000 more hitting that mark every day are a natural target for self-driving vehicles. Mobility, getting to the doctor or the grocery store, seeing family and friends, could make seniors the robot cop's early adopters. Uber now offers or intends to offer the following types of transportation services. So they actually are, in Vegas, they do have flying drones, from the airport to downtown Vegas. And Dallas, they're building it from the airport to downtown Dallas. So you'll be able to get on the drone at the airport and fly into Dallas. So there's all sorts of things that are happening. There's ambulances now that are autonomous. So if the person's in a really serious accident, the person can work on it and the ambulance goes to the hospital, by itself. So there's a whole series of things. When will your internal combustion motor engine be worthless for a trade-in? There's in Singapore, they've had a law for several years. You can't have a car over 10 years old because it pollutes too much. So 2 years ago, they established a rule and they fixed the number of cars in Singapore. So it doesn't matter if you're the new CEO of Exxon and you're flying into Singapore, you can't have a car unless you buy somebody else's space. What they do is there's a bunch of people that go and buy all the cars over 10 years old and then send them to countries that don't have that rule. So when you start buying a car around 2025, you need to start thinking, what's going to happen if I have to sell that car? Will it be worth anything? The latest motorhome innovation comes from overseas in Germany. It's a new electric motorhome unveiled by RV company, and it's built for the open road with a sleek design, head-to-toe solar panels, so you never have to worry about finding the next charging station. And here's a pizza autonomous vehicle that goes in the neighborhood and makes deliveries. Okay, Ping is in China where they have a huge shortage of doctors. And you get in, it's like getting into a little photo thing, at a shop, and they're talking to a doctor who's diagnosing them, and they have things they can plug in. And the next little thing over happens to be a whole series of medicines. And then if it decides that you need medicine, it'll pop medicine out. And in China, they already know your bank account, and if you can afford it, and they deduct it immediately. Driverless ambulances could take the strain off emergency devices, free paramedics from dealing with high-risk patients where time is critical. Drones can be used by health services for deliveries to remote locations, which they're already doing in Africa. Business will invest in office on wheels, sleek traveling workspace, assembling first-class suite on an airplane. On the high end of the market, city dwellers and country will like special order, custom-made autonomous vehicles whose shape and onboard gadgetry is adapted for a particular function or hobby. So you might think of things you're designing. So what if all these car companies approach you and say, can you design, here's the shell makeout. What can you design that'll be the new market, for autonomous cars? You could have your office, if it's taking you an hour to commute outside of Dallas or someplace like that, you could be working fully in an air-conditioned, office. You want to take some friends to dinner that night? Okay, the restaurant already has a vehicle that'll pick the two other couples up. It'll have appetizers and drinks waiting for you. It will drive you to the restaurant. After the meal's over, you don't have to worry about driving drunk. It'll drive you home. Toronto-based design studio created Autonomous Travel Suite, and it combines the ease and comfort of a hotel room with the power of autonomous driving. Think of it as an ultra-deluxe Uber that you can sleep, work, and eat while you travel. So if you've got to go someplace that's 8 hours away or 10 hours away, and you can drive in this, it will take you, and you'll be in total comfort, and you can sleep in it, and it'll drive you back. Create unholy alliances. Find a partner with companies completely outside your field, non-traditional players who force you to think octagonally to your existing strategy and value chain. The partners of the largest architecture firm in the world met and directed all of their locations to design all future parking garages with external ramps. As driverless cars become ubiquitous, the garages can then be turned into office buildings, shopping centers, apartments, or urban farms, because they'll have the same, level, and they can fur down, all of the air conditioning space depending on what they want. So, but if they're interior, you've ruined the whole thing. So they're not going to design any more parking garages with internal ramps. Okay, the global food supply is on the brink of disaster, according to a newly published report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. More than 100 experts contributed to the report, which concludes that climate change is already negatively impacting food production in real ways, as the problem is posed to get even worse if global temperatures continue to increase, though it's not too late to avoid a total catastrophe. The next major food revelation will be vertical agriculture, which will grow food in vertical buildings rather than horizontal land. Vertical agriculture will be able to recycle all nutrients, capture all pollutants, and require no use of antibiotics or pesticides. Today, over 1/3 of usable land is devoted to agriculture, 70% of which is for animals or meat production. Vertical agriculture will free up almost all of this. Tide and wave energy gives Mississippi an edge. Ocean agriculture and aquaculture could be a priority for Mississippi with its extensive coastline. Green roofs, walls, rainwater harvesting, graywater harvesting, cisterns, things that you should be doing to your office buildings. The city of Chicago put a green roof on top of its city hall and saved 40% on its energy. And it was done by a landscape architect at Texas A&M. So there's a lot of things you can start doing to make your building more efficient. There's a hospital in New York that just put in green roofs to grow all the vegetables for their patients. France passed a trailblazing new law that requires that all new buildings constructed in commercial areas to be partially covered by either solar panels or green roofs. Not only will this bring dramatic changes to the nation's skyline, it will bolster the efficiency of all new commercial construction. Winning companies don't just out-hustle or out-muscle the competition, they outthink the competition. Business today is about brains, not brawn. It's about how many ideas you generate, not how many factories you own. So what will an unintended consequence of man-made emissions for this century and beyond? Did you know there's a 25% chance your cause of death will be due to environmental pollution? According to the World Health Organization, some 12.6 million people, or 1 in 4 worldwide, died in 2012 due to living or working in unhealthy conditions. In addition, environmental degradation seriously affects overall quality of life and the balance of Earth's ecosystems through loss of forest, open spaces, marine environments, and biodiversity. The second challenge is mass extinction. We're killing off somewhere between 50 to 80% of all life on the planet. We're chopping away the roots of the ecosystem we ourselves depend on. The insects and fish and birds and plants and trees are dying off first. When they go, a sudden collapse is likely to follow, and the whole supply chain implodes on itself. 75% more of the Earth's planets died out in the Earth's history. The sixth mass extinction may now be the beginning, and the apocalypse this time is us, say Stanford researchers. As the world warms, more water evaporates from the ocean, as well as lakes and rivers. That means that when a hurricane or a storm system comes along, there's on average more water vapor available for it to pick up and dump than there would have been 50 or 100 years ago. Stormwater management systems may not be engineered for this century's rainstorms. The Antarctic ice sheet lost more than 3 trillion tons of ice in the last 25 years. Several ice shelves have collapsed, and the Antarctic ice sheets are thinning and retreating. If the Twice Glacier were to go bad, it could cause the shores of civilization. The loss is responsible for 4% of global sea rise every year. If the entire glacier went, the seas would rise by a few feet and cause the surrounding glacier melt. The seas might rise by more than a dozen feet. Goodbye Miami, goodbye Boston. In the Gulf of Mexico, we've got sea level rise that is 2 to 3 times as high as the average for coastal cities across the world, because the Gulf of Mexico is so shallow. The ice melting in Greenland and Iceland right now is being redistributed across the globe to the Gulf of Mexico. FEMA's redrawn flood maps from the Northeast to the Gulf Coast and is affecting 350 global coastal communities. It is requiring homes and buildings to be raised from 6 to 22 feet. If they don't comply, insurance rates can be more than 46 times the present. Okay, here's population living within the 100-year floodplain. Houston has almost 300,000. New Orleans has 250,000 population living within the floodplain. To protect the U.S. coastline on the East Coast, it will require a 16-foot wall along the entire coastline. Trillions of dollars of coastal property at risk. Especially vulnerable are Boston, Miami, Charleston, Atlantic City, New Orleans, Virginia Beach, and Houston. Right now, if you're trying to build a building along the Atlantic, the bankers won't give you a loan of any property that's less than 10 feet above sea level, because they think within 30 years you won't be able to pay it off. If we stay on our current climate plane, some homes and commercial properties with 30-year mortgages in places on the East, Gulf, and West Coast could quite literally be underwater before the note is paid off. A report from the nonprofit Union of Concerned Scientists estimated that sea level rise could put more than 300,000 coastal homes in the lower 48 states, worth $117 billion at risk of chronic flooding over the next 3 decades. Another 14,000 commercial properties are at risk. By 2100, 2.4 million houses and more than 100,000 commercial properties, collectively worth more than $1 trillion, could be at risk if emissions aren't curbed. The warming of the globe, spurred by humanity's dependence on fossil fuels, is weighing the dice in favor of increasingly frequent and severe extreme weather phenomena. Also relatively foreseeable is heavier rain because warmer air carries more moisture. In other words, do not be surprised if the country sees more costly disasters, such as the flooding that hit in Baton Rouge. And Dorian, when it came in, did you know that, of course, Dorian was a huge, powerful storm, but it was toned down? It was actually going to be way higher than it was, but they had a sandstorm on the Sierras that came in, and it toned it down. And you saw how strong it was. If it hadn't been for that sandstorm, there probably wouldn't even be a Bermuda, and a lot of the Florida coast would be gone. 17 of the 18 warmest years on record have occurred since 2000. The warming trend has been driven in large part by land use changes, including cutting down forests, paying over natural services, rising emissions of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels and methane from livestock production. Even if the net emissions are reduced to zero this century, the persistence of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere means that heat waves will continue to get worse for decades to come. Scientists say we've reached the tipping point. As the mercury rises, governments in rich and poor countries alike must do more to protect their populations from this very real and quite deadly aspect of climate change. In a world where wildfires and hurricanes are becoming more frequent, design for new housing would be smart to anticipate the climate disasters that are coming. So the new buildings that aren't made from wood or any other conventional building are in danger. Instead, they're made from bioceramic, which can withstand disasters and perhaps dramatically lower construction costs. The design of a startup called GeoShip, it's the dome's lightweight material, has a long list of advantages, particularly in a world where the effects of climate change and the increase in natural disasters it brings becomes more apparent every year. The ceramic is fireproof up to 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. In a fire, the house won't burn. It reflects 80% of the heat from the sun, helping keep the inside cool in heat waves. The material is strong, and in combination with the inherent strength of the dome shape, could be able to survive hurricanes. Okay, this is Pepperdine, and we had one of the profs in engineering there last year, and he was giving a lecture, and before and after he kept getting on his phone because he lived in Malibu, and that's where one of the firestorms were starting, and he was calling to see if his house was still in danger. But what Pepperdine University did, they built 2 gigantic buildings that are completely fireproof, and they have 2 weeks worth of water and food. So if the fire is coming on and the roads for the students to escape are not there, the students can go into those buildings, and they have 2 weeks of food and water. Hospitals have to be designed for a new era of megastorm because we're beyond historic data. We're into predictive forecasting. How can you make sure that your building is adaptable to what's happening in the future? 2009 is the hottest year ever recorded on the planet. What if in 2050 they say 2019 was the coolest year recorded in the last 30 years, which is scary. But if you start thinking about hospitals and the storm and Katrina, the hospitals had all their generators in the basement. So Katrina came in, knocked out their power. They couldn't get patients out in time. And some of the patients were starting to suffer really bad death. And the doctors went in and gave lethal doses of medicine to several of the patients that weren't going to survive. So you're starting to look at people designing hospitals that have hurricane-proof glass, and then behind it they're laminating plastic on that, and they're putting all of the generators, second, third floor, roof, any place like that. When the hurricane hit Houston, the health center had all of their animals that they were testing that were incurable diseases they were testing out things on in the basement. So the floods came, and all of those animals with the incurable diseases were floating around in the streets of Houston. The sheer number of AC units is already a threat to the climate because the amount of energy these devices consume. There's 1.2 billion AC units pumping cool air into people's homes. That number is on track to reach 4.5 billion by 2050. Energy demand is expected to triple in the same amount of time. It's a vicious cycle. Cooling ourselves is actually contributing to the climate change that's heating up the planet. As global temperatures rise and energy efficiency becomes ever more important, and a group of companies, startups, and research groups are racing to build wearable and portable devices that can act like mini AC units, personalized for you, whether you want to save money, regulate your health, or lessen your carbon footprint. And I don't know if you've seen this, Sony just came out with it, and it's for the Tokyo Olympics. And it's you have to buy the shirt with it, and it puts a little cooler thing in there. So this should be interesting to see how that works. So research building design before there was an air conditioner. Orient your buildings, overhangs, dog trots, lawns and trees, prevailing breeze, operable windows. As you're slowly switching, from gas and other kinds of energy to solar, you're going to have a transition period. In December, the World Economic Forum solar and wind energy is now the same price or cheaper than new fossil fuel capacity, and more than 30 countries reported the World Economic Forum. As prices for solar and wind power continue their precipitous fall, 2/3 of all nations will reach the point known as grid parity within a few years, even without subsidies. This is one of the most important developments in the history of humanity, and this year marked a number of major milestones for renewable energy. The future belongs to people who see possibilities before they become obvious. World population is expected to peak at 9+ billion by 2050. The United Nations estimates a 50% increase in population in 4 decades. So we're approaching the limit of our food and water supply. Only 120 million of the projected 3+ billion increase in population over the next 30 years will be in the U.S. All of the increase is due to immigration. The U.S. as of 2 to 3 years ago hasn't been able to reproduce just to maintain its population. The only way the U.S. is growing is through immigration, but Trump might fix that. U.S. policymakers much place increased attention on caring for a larger and more dependent aging population and dealing with the realities of a slower growing labor force. In particular, it requires a more serious discussion of U.S. immigration policy because of the future contributions that immigrants will make to growing American society and economy. Demographics say that immigrants tend to be younger, can help maintain a high worker-to-retiree ratio. Russia will experience a decrease of 34 million in their population over the next 30 years. The European will see a 40 million person decrease in population. The population will continue to accelerate. Hungary just put out an ad for all of their citizens. If you have 4 children, you won't have to pay any income tax for the rest of your life. France has bulletin boards up, the Netherlands, all over the UK. So there are more people living inside this circle than outside it. The present developed nation share of the world population will be only 10% by 2050. We'll be the 3rd largest country in the world in 2050. Anyone, population-wise? Nigeria. By 2100, Africa will have 25% of the world's population. If you begin building 100 cities of 600,000 people each year for the next 30 years, you would meet the needs of the global population increase by 2050. It's an unprecedented era of accelerating change in human existence where the past will no longer predict the future. Currently, there exists no system that can feasibly plan and create the infrastructure for those cities or a construction system to build cities at that speed. So you need to be on. You need to start thinking, what can you do to build cities at that speed? Can you build 50% of the buildings existing on Earth in the next 30 years with existing technology? You can't rely on the technology from the 20th century. You can't do today's job with yesterday's methods and be in business tomorrow. With an increase of 100 to 120 million by 2050, the U.S. would only have to build 6 to 7 cities of 600,000 every year for the next 30 years. And they predicted the 100 to 120 is all due to immigration. Before this end of century, due to artificial intelligence and robots, 70% of today's occupation will likewise be replaced by automation. Robot costs are dropping fast, and as manufacturing costs shrink because of robots, the cost of transportation becomes a far greater factor than the cost of production. Artificial intelligence will radically alter the construction industry. Your AI robot does the quantity takeoff in your job, orders the material when scheduled. The robots at the storage facility load the materials on the driverless truck that delivers everything to the site. With programs able to read construction documents, estimate, order, and schedule what will be next. If AI and robots can generate and build buildings within program parameters, will structural engineers, architecture, and construction crews be eliminated? And this will build as fast as a master bricklayer. And I don't know if you've seen this. They have the guns in their hand, and they can put up the chipboard. Atlantic Gulf and Pacific Construction in the Philippines is part of a wave of outsourcing that can do for the construction industry what Indian companies did for back office services. At Camp Pendleton in California coast, the U.S. Marine Corps outsourced a 500,000 square foot naval hospital complex, which came in 6 months ahead of schedule and $100 million under the $580 million budget. The head of Fluor in Houston has teamed up with AG&P and said there's a significant difference in construction price. Everything we do here in Houston, we can do there. And then here's a whole bunch of prefab construction that goes in much faster and cheaper. California just passed a new law allowing small cottages to be built in the backyards to ease the housing crisis. If you're living anywhere in those big cities in California, if you're on staff, a fireman, officer, anything like that, you can't afford to live closer than an hour to 2 hours away from those cities. So they're having to take buses in. And so California said, okay, if your yard is big enough, you can put a prefab house in it and then rent it out, which will help, people come in being able to work within walking distance, of their jobs. Unintended consequence of 3D printing. There was a shortage of highly skilled workers who can deal with emerging technologies. Caterpillar's working on a giant 3D printer that will print out an apartment working 24/7. Chinese construction company printed 10 one-story homes in a single day last year and revealed a 5-story apartment block and a 3-story mansion. 3D printed office was designed by Gensler for the United Arab Immigrants and the headquarters for the Dubai Futures Foundation. It primarily serves as a meeting place for parties from all over the globe. The 3D printed office is fully functional building featuring electricity, water, telecommunications, and air conditioning systems. Lewis Grand Hotel in the Philippines was printed with sand and volcanic ash, resulting in stronger walls and improved good bonding between layers. The conceptual 3D printed house was created by design consultancy. Back in June 2016, the Curve Appeal design was awarded first prize in the Freeform Home Design Challenge. Students from Washington University in St. Louis worked on an energy efficient prototype house. The Lotus House was unveiled as part of Solar Decathlon China 2018. And this 3D printed estate is being built with the help of Italian 3D printed pioneer, and the ambitious project is being erected on a 5-acre property in upstate New York. Aside from the 3D printed structure, the property includes a swimming pool, jacuzzi, and car garage. And solving the housing problem was unveiled by a construction technology company at South by Southwest Festival in Austin. A 650 square foot, one bedroom house printed in less than a day for under $10,000. Australia opened a desalination plant in 2007 powered by wind farms. Saudi Arabia and Spain are constructing solar-powered desalination plants. The best hope is that lower-cost desalination technology will provide much-needed fresh water. A possible threat here is that converting the salt water may alter the world's ecosystem in unanticipated ways. Also, what would you do with mountains of salt? So there's a company that's coming up with salt bricks. The SALT project creates building blocks composed of compressed salt, which are proven to be a solid structural material on par with packed earth and other frequently used local resources. It's hoped that the SALT project's base and Qatar, the newest planned city, will be the first in a series of self-sufficient communities of salt towns with organic infrastructures and regenerating greenhouses to grow native vegetation, and Saudis working on saltwater-tolerant vegetables. The entire world of business is now in a constant state of agile development. New releases are constant, tweaks, upgrades, and course corrections take place on the fly. There is no status quo. There is only a process of change. The U.S. military funded MIT to come up with Internet in the Brain. So there's a very good chance that your children or grandchildren will have a chip implanted in their brain that will collect them to the cloud. So DARPA invests up to $60 million in the Neural Engine System Design Program over the next 4 years. They're developing a cubic-sized brain implant that can translate human thoughts into computer code and vice versa by rapidly communicating between up to 1 million neurons and a digital interface. The impact could enable the transfer of data to and from the brain. So Hawkins, the physicist, said he thought by 2040 they could download his consciousness onto a computer. And South Africa University there actually downloaded some consciousness onto the internet for a brief period of time. Elon Musk thinks his AI technology on a mission continue to replace jobs and more traditional technology, humans will become obsolete and need to merge with machines. Since computers can communicate at speeds well beyond an organism's capacity, Musk thinks that creating a symbiotic relationship between us and our tech will give us the edge we need. Humankind is programmed to chase progress, as the theory goes, to keep making more powerful computers till we make ourselves obsolete or decide merge with the smart machines. Either you become something that's really, really different from a human, or you can stay as human for nostalgic reasons. But then you will not be a major decision maker. You will not play a role in shaping the earth. In the 2040s, the bulk of our thinking is out in the cloud. The biological portion of our brain didn't go away, but the non-biological portion will be much more powerful and will be uploaded automatically the way we back up everything now that's digital. In the future, they'll divide human history into before the internet and after the internet, BI and AI. So anyhow, thank you all, and hope I didn't scare you too much.